So I'm starting out. I know I don't really want to cover too much of the basics of entering billing codes into the system. I know a lot of people are very familiar with that piece. I want to go into some more pieces with different settings and different ways to manage billing and manage stuff with the remittance advice and kind of track this information to make sure responses are getting received for things. So I'm starting out first in a demo office with some test user stuff, because I want to be able to first really show some stuff about the submission process, where down in the bottom right-hand corner beside our submit claims that we're pretty familiar with is the green check mark. And what this check mark button does is a validation of what information Accuro can recognize about our bills, and if there are any errors that might prevent these from being submitted or processed and paid by the ministry. You can see here there's a variety of different errors that are on my claims right now. So some of them, each one's pretty different. Some, it tells us here that the patient's OHIP health number is expired. Now, this is a pretty common one, and all it is referencing is the health card expiry date field in the patient demographics. So I'm just going to close this window for a quick second. I'm going to select that BCFHT Jack patient that has that error. And we can also see when we click on the claim line, the error shows it down in the bottom as well, that the patient OHIP number, health number is expired. If I go into the patient demographics section, it's referencing this expiry date field on the screen, because that date is in the past. Even if I know, hey, I put in that version code today and I know that that's correct in validating, if I get rid of that date and then update the patient, I'll go back into the claim section. I'll do my validation again, and that error is now cleared. So it's just looking at the fact that that date field is a date that's in the past. Some of these others do fairly accurately tell you what the actual error, what requires attention. So there's some here that a master number is required for the hospital billing. There's also another one relating to hospital billing where the admission date was missing. So you just go in, add that information into the bill, and it should clear that error. A couple other ones, the code requires a diagnostic code, and that hasn't been entered yet. So again, we just go in and input that diagnostic code in. It'll also tell us if a procedure code is missing. So that may be that those bills haven't actually had the codes entered yet. We don't have that day sheet from our physician to enter that information yet. It's not too common, but it does come up with new physicians when we're doing some billing sometimes, that the practitioner number is required. That happens because appointments start getting booked for the provider, and as soon as an appointment is booked, the basic back-end part of the bill gets started. And sometimes that happens before the full configuration of the provider is complete. So if I look at this Gregory patient, I can see when I double click and open up the claim details that this practitioner number is actually missing from here. So just double click into that field. I can select that practitioner number, save and close, and that should clear out that error as well. So I can see that I don't have that one anymore. The other two that are here, number 3 and 4, are telling us that the procedure code must be in the form of a number, or a letter, and then this followed by 3 numbers. So if I look at those two bills for the demos and the doppelganger patient, doppelganger has FAF, and it's trying to submit that to OHIP. That's not an OHIP claim per se. It's something that would get submitted to WSIB as a third-party bill. So that one just needs to have the insurer changed or corrected and something adjusted with that. But the other one that commonly happens is in searching for some claims, you search for, if I research for M647, there's 2 options that are listed as the procedure codes. One has the A at the end and the other one doesn't. So we just need to make sure that we're always choosing the code that does not have the letter, suffix letter at the end, and that'll clear that error. So if I validate again, I can see that now it's telling me that code needs a diagnostic code, but the procedure code is correct in that one. I'm going to go through and actually click on Submit Claims now. And I may have to wait on this because the submission is being done at the moment. So I just want to kind of talk about the options that are in the submission screen, because once it comes up, it'll ask for the permissions that you want on your screen or to your computer. So we want to make sure we're always clicking on the permit all access option when that does come up. I'll just give this another minute or two and see if that user gets their claim submitted, and maybe we can sneak in. So again, this is where I was mentioning we need to make sure we can do that permit all access. And that's going to make sure that Accuro and your computer have full read and write access to each other to be able to create these submission files in the ON claims folder on your C drive. It does talk about it in this window as well, but we want to make sure that we leave this window alone until we go into the MCEDT webpage, finish our submission through that webpage, and then as soon as, or as long as we have the successful response through the ministry's webpage that our claim file has been submitted, we can click on successfully uploaded. If we have an error, we're not able to get through, maybe the ministry's website is having a few issues with running properly and launching, we want to make sure that we click cancel so that our claims don't actually get marked through Accuro as being submitted. I'm going to hit successfully uploaded. So it cleared out the files that it was able to submit. And down in the bottom left-hand corner, or right-hand corner, just below the green check mark, we have this double gears button. And when we click on that, it opens up a submission management window for us. This allows us to go back through a drop-down menu here and locate and find whatever submission files may have been completed. It gives us the date and time, as well as the file name, how many bills were submitted, and by whom. If I mark this as being submitted and I didn't mean to, it didn't actually get submitted, I'd want to come in here and I can undo the submission, which just makes those claims go back into our unsubmitted claims tab to be captured on the next submission that's done. So I'm going to undo submission. It always wants us to confirm that, so I click yes. I'll close out of this window, and I can see that it added those claims back into here. So I'm going to change into a different office so that we can see a little bit more of the information. So I'm going to remove the patient name, and I've configured a lot of areas of my Accuro screen right now to hide any of the actual specific patient information, because for the next few parts that I want to go through, we actually have to pull up some real-time examples, and we can't really do some test patients. There are a few settings in this menu at the top of the scroll bar, down towards the bottom, where we can choose to hide anything that's not marked as arrived. We can choose whether we want to include claims from the current date in our unsubmitted claims tab or not. So maybe if we know that we haven't done today's billing yet, but we want to submit everything else and we just don't want to see those procedure code required validation warnings, we can remove that setting if we would like to. There's also an option if you work with locums, do billing for locum providers that may work in a variety of offices and each office is managing their own billings and submissions, that we can view claims in our current office only instead of all the claims for a provider. So I'm just going to switch now into my secondary office. And I'm going to go into the Not Reconciled tab first. So this Not Reconciled tab will pull in anything that is requiring a correction or a reconciliation action in Accuro. So it's stuff where we get responses from the ministry, but there is some kind of a code and Accuro isn't sure whether it got paid or really what's going on with that claim. This does take a little bit to go into. We are continually working with QHR on the speed of Accuro as a whole, as well as the speed of the claim section in particular, because that does seem to be a little bit slower than everything else. So when we come into the Not Reconciled tab, by default, these two checkboxes for show overpayments and show refusals should be selected. What we want to make sure we also have set is this option here for show all remittances versus show selected remittances. The reason for this is oftentimes we know we get our RA file on a monthly basis. However, we're not always able to get everything corrected and resubmitted each month. So when we have show selected remittances, we're limited to really only seeing the errors from one remittance file at a time. And as soon as we download the next month's RA file, we don't have that visibility anymore to the previous month's corrections that may still be required to be done. So by having show all remittances, we're always seeing everything that needs to be corrected. In here, we can see this one claim is showing with some blue font. It means that this has already been marked to be resubmitted. So whatever the error, in this case, the mismatched version code, has been fixed, and this claim is sitting waiting to get included on the next submission that is done for our provider. To see a little bit more of errors, because we've already gotten a lot of things cleaned up, I'm going to flip over to the Remittances tab. And the Remittances tab will always show us the constant report of what the ministry sent each month. So if we want to look at a different month's remittance or RA file, there's a payment period section down at the bottom of the window, and this will let us change. So if I wanted to look at the July RA, I would just click on July and give it a few seconds to process and update that information that I'm looking at on the screen. There are two dates that show up in here. The earlier date of the two is typically for specialist billings, while the later date is for the family practice stuff. So we always want to watch and make sure that we're picking the later date of the month. So we can see here that this will show us all of our codes, everything the way it was responded to by the ministry. This is always going to show us things that were rejected. It won't update or change anything based on what we may have corrected, because this is just our standalone report from what the ministry's responses were. In any of our billing tabs here, we can click on any of the different headers up at the top here. So if I wanted to sort by the service date, if I wanted to sort by the explanation code of the error, and just click on that header, and then I kind of have to scroll down in this section because a lot of things are fee-for-service amounts. And then I start getting into our different codes. So 30 is a common one that we get for any of our Q code billings. And those things we just want to mark as adjust to paid to clear it out when we see it in our not reconciled screen. There's a lot of different codes. The other super common one is our I2, which is globally funded codes. These are considered the in the basket codes that we know our physicians are getting paid 15% of. However, the way it comes back from the ministry, the response paid column does show as 0. And that's just because that's kind of how the ministry system is. And it comes into an error in our not reconciled because of this response paid being nothing. Again, these items we would just mark as adjust to paid. You can right click on any claims, and we would want to be doing this from our not reconciled tab. And then we have our different actions. So adjusting to paid, if something needs to be written off, then we can do that from here as well. And if there's things that we've corrected and fixed and we want to mark them as resubmitted, we have a resubmit option as well. A couple of the lesser known areas of the billing section are the Unmatched Remittances and Accounts Receivable tabs. So I'm going to start with the Unmatched Remittances. This information does show by a provider's billing number. So it may also include claims that have been done through the walk-in clinics that haven't quite matched up. And for whatever reason, they're not always able to correctly match from the from the remittance that comes in to the code that we've billed. I've seen it sometimes happen on injection codes or hospital billings where the ministry is able to know based on other stuff that was submitted, that the code that we build, instead of the G372, it should be the G373. I'm not going to click on anything right now because any of these items that we do click on will pull up patient information down at the bottom and kind of load some stuff, and that's something I can't really change too much. But we would want to, as soon as we click on something, identify down at the bottom if that is the same patient in the same billing that was submitted that is still outstanding. We'd highlight the code at the bottom that we want to match to, and then we have a match button in the bottom right of the system. And that's just going to match that response to that bill and basically reconcile it so it's not showing still as being an outstanding bill. There are some other items in here, like some of our bonuses, our preventative care bonus codes, and sometimes our CME billings that get done where we might not necessarily submit directly through Accuro, but submit in other areas, and that information comes back on the RA. What we can do with these items, if we know it wasn't billed, there's nothing to reconcile it with in Accuro, there'd be a button to mark not on file. So that's mark NOF. And that just marks it in the system as, yep, we've gotten this response, but the bill actually isn't right in our EMR system to track. Next, we have our accounts receivable section. So I'm going to flip back into my demo office because I have a few things set up in here to be able to show this really easily. And accounts receivable is one thing that we want to be tracking and checking and looking at on a regular basis to make sure that we are getting responses for everything that we're submitting and that we're not missing anything for a long time. As most people are aware, we really only do have 6 months from the date of service of a bill to get that bill paid by the ministry. So if I want to look at my OHIP insurers for my demo provider, I'm going to find claims. And it's going to do its searching through to see what might be outstanding for this provider. At the bottom of this window, there are some color coding options for how it's flagging our claims. So there's less than 60 days, less than 90 days, less than 120 days, or more than 120 days that this bill is outstanding. You can, if you would like to, personalize these colors. You just single click on that little square, and it lets you pick a different color for that bill or for that status time frame. Make this one a bright red, and we should see that these two claims will change into that red color as it updates. This is a really good way to track and make sure that, again, everything that we have submitted to the ministry is coming back into our system. And if there's a lot of things based on a date of service or a specific submission date that didn't get submitted, this is our sort of cue that we need to follow up with the ministry and inquire as to why these haven't been processed and we haven't received any responses yet. It could be that something happened during that submission process where the ministry did not receive the file, and we want to make sure that we catch that to be able to quickly resubmit those claims to have those be processed by the ministry. There is an option at the bottom to print this report. So I can choose if I want to print just a selected bill or all bills. And then it'll give us an accounts receivable report with our patient's information, the date of service of the bill, if it was submitted and when, and then it breaks it down by those specific time frames. The accounts receivable does show anything that might be outstanding, whether it's been submitted or not. So it may include things that have an error and prevent it from being submitted, or items that we've billed but may not have actually completed our submission yet. So you want to take that information into account as well as we look at our accounts receivable. Okay. as far as a few items for tracking and following up, especially when we're dealing with our errors and rejections, there is an option when you right-click on bills from any of the tabs to look at a claim history. The claim history will show you if something has been submitted and or received. So if I look at this one, because I can see it was submitted today when I did a submission earlier, it tells me what the code is, when the submission was done. And then as we start downloading our RAs into Accuro, it'll tell us here the status of what, if it was paid, if it was refused, and it'll give us an error code. If we submit multiple times, try and resubmit to get this corrected, the whole history of that will start displaying in this window as well. There are two other tabs at the end of this claims section. We're going to plan a future tips and tricks session to include or cover the tracked claims section. And the other tab is where any electronic reports, most commonly our outside use reports, will process into. So we can download that file from the ministry's EDT website, and we can load that information into Accuro. We would double click on the date and the file that's here when we have the list. And if we're prompted to, we want to make sure we're always choosing Internet Explorer to open that file with. And then it would just open in a web page through our Citrix session and show us all the patient information as far as who obtained services outside of our organization, where it'll be tracked as outside use. So that's all that we have for our billing session today. Not sure if anybody has any questions or issues with anything that they've run into, but that can always be directed towards our support team, as billing is a bit of a one-off item that is very particular in this certain positions, certain patients, situations that occur. You can always reach out to us by email at support@bcfht.ca. And I just want to make sure, while I have attention, that if you are emailing, especially billing stuff, we would need examples. So we want to make sure that this file number found to the right of the health card number is the only piece of information that is used to identify the patient. You can also give us a call at 705-797-8833, extension 2, and we'd be happy to help with your billing inquiries there as well. Thanks, and I hope you guys have a great day.